All righty, time for a brand new episode of Flyers Daily for the 23rd of June, 2025. Flyers Daily, as always, presented by Ticketmaster. Make more memories live. How about Draft Week 2025? All tons to get into in this episode. All the words being said out there, smoke signals and everything else. And we've got a lot to discuss on this episode before what is a hectic week of off-season hockey. And let's do it with the man you read on PhiladelphiaFlyers.com, NHL.com, and HockeyHotStove.com. They got great draft coverage in all of those places and more. It is Bill Meltzer. Bill, you rested up for draft?
All ready to go. Nice lead in this week. The Flyers Alumni Charity Classic weekend, which will continue actually today on Monday. You and I will both be in Wilmington for the golf tournament, but on Saturday they had a pickleball tournament, and on Sunday they had a 5K. Just lots of fun. More than 60 different alumni from different generations of the team. It's like a big family reunion, and that's a great way of leading draft week as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, it's a great way to drop the puck on it. And, all those guys that have come through here and been Flyers, been one once, one forever is kind of the theory with that. We will be doing you and I and Anthony Sanfilippo from Snow the Goalie, a bit of a crossover episode that we'll be taping from the alumni outing. We'll have some great guests. I think Russ is out of town. Bundy is playing in the tournament. I'm not sure where his game is at these days, but I'm sure he'll stop by. And we'll have other guests as well. Crossover episode, Flyers Daily and Snow the Goalie. And we're going to put Flyers Daily as top billing as the only Flyers podcast. That's what we're going to do. Just thwart that notion. But nonetheless, that's going to be a great time. And with it being draft week as well, and this is our first decentralized draft. And the Flyers are having a draft party coming up on Friday. All the details right here. It's Friday at the Hard Rock in Atlantic City. 6 p.m. it begins at the Hard Rock Hotel, AC. Special appearances at the draft party, which begins at 6. Dan Hilferty will be there. Flyers head coach Rick Tocchet will be there. I think it's his first public, per se, appearance since being hired. Mark Recchi, Todd Fedoric, and many more. Be DJ and live entertainment, raffles for autographed Flyers items, and musician memorabilia. It's the Hard Rock. You got to have the music stuff as well, which is awesome. Oh, yeah. And also a live broadcast, which I'll be a part of with John Kincaid and 97.5 The Fanatic, my old radio station. And I'm thrilled to be working with John. He and I had never worked together. We've known each other since probably about 87. He was an assistant coach on my high school team for 2 years. And we've never done a show together. We've been on the radio together, but never done a show. So we're thrilled to do that. Your ticket also includes a complimentary voucher for food and soft drinks. And tickets for the draft party are $6, commemorating where the Flyers are picking. Now, if they move up, I wonder if the ticket goes down. But selecting 6th overall, which proceeds benefit all Flyers charities. So it's going to be a great time there on Friday as the draft will get underway. Round 1 on Friday. And the Flyers, obviously, with 3 picks in the first round, 4 in the second, are going to be very busy around this. Real quick on Flyers charities, just want to send out my thanks to them as well. On Friday, it was the video was released publicly of my partnership with Penn Medicine and Flyers Charities and my fight for cancer. They show some footage of me getting chemo, going through the treatment, and kind of telling my story, urging people to get a colonoscopy if you have history or you're having some health issues. Advocate for yourself. And the Flyers also put out a tweet with a picture of the head of Flyers Charities, Cindy Stutman, myself, my care team, and a big old check of $10,000, which Flyers Charities donated to the Penn Medicine My Care team in honor of my fight. So it's just so many thanks. They do such great work in this community. And again, they'll be a part of it with the draft party this weekend. I want to send my thanks out for that as well. So big week, Bill. It is draft week. Everything is we're going to hear a lot of stuff between now and then. How rested are you for the week? Because it could be chaotic with the amount of picks, amount of movement, amount of things that could take place this week.
Oh, without a doubt. With the draft being decentralized, it might be spread out over the week too. It always feels like when teams arrive in the draft city is when things pick up. But yeah, there'll be a whirlwind of activity. And one thing we don't get this year, unfortunately, is the on-site reports of, well, so-and-so GM he's been the other team's table for a while now.
Yeah.
We're not gonna know any of that. We're not gonna know who's texting and who's on the phone with who. So, but I expect, a lot of discussion for sure. What seems to happen with those top 4 or 5 picks is there's rumors so and so team is in business, and then there's never an offer that matches how lofty their trade price is.
Those are quick calls.
Yeah, usually they are, because it's they want something really high, and that it's just too much for most teams to do. But I think in the latter part of the first round, because this is a draft of maybe not superstar talent, but pretty good depth, I do think you'll see some movement in there.
Yeah, that'll be interesting, because the Flyers have a lot of ammo to be able to jump from 22 maybe to 15 or 16. What does that price look like, by the way? If you want to go from 22 to, say, 15,
yeah,
what does that look like?
I would say, well, it would be the 22, and it would be one of the second-round picks. Now,
so you're going to jump 7 spots, and you're only going to lose 1 second-round pick. I mean, you're going to lose your first too. But
but the Flyers have a pick very early in the second. It was their own, the 6th pick in the second round. So that's not really much. That's really not that much different from another first-round pick. It's not really all that different from the 32nd or 31st pick, Edmonton's, which maybe they put that in play. There's a lot of ways they could go with this. If there's a player they like and want to move up to grab. But I would say to move up 7 spots in that range. There's usually, if you're picking 15th, there's probably somebody around 20, 22 who you also like, maybe not quite as much. But if you have that additional asset with some other players you like, that maybe that might be enticing to a team. So I think there are ways the Flyers could package picks where they could really go in a bunch of different ways here, Jason. You know, they could put assets together to go after an NHL roster player. They could try to move up, as we were just talking about.
Yep.
In the first round, or even the second. Maybe they have those 2 kind of close space picks in the 40s. You know, maybe they move that one up into the 30s somewhere, in the upper 30s. And the third one too is that maybe you're diversifying some assets over the upcoming years. It's hard. It also depends on where you're drafting players from, though, because if you're drafting players out of junior hockey, then you only have 2 years to sign them.
Yep.
If you draft them out of Russia, on the other hand, there isn't a timetable. You can take as long as you need to sign them. Or a USHL kid who's going to college. So you're looking probably at least 3 years, maybe 4 years to assess them. Now they need to close some of those loopholes with the college talents, because
they're going back and forth between CHL and college now too.
And that has a whole other dynamic too, where guys who are playing Canadian junior now they can play college hockey for a year or two. And the advantage in that one, Jason, for teams, is that because of the CHL rules, the AHL, the age rules, now you could have a 19-year-old player, even an 18-year-old playing in the American League after a year. So that's that option isn't open now for guys coming out of junior. So some of those guys,
but not for Jetlachenko, unfortunately.
Yeah, not for him. He still falls under that rule where he's either going to Guelph in the Ontario League, or he's got to be in the NHL. I hate the rule. It's an antiquated rule. I know why the rule exists.
Yep.
In a nutshell, because when they changed the rules and made the draft age younger, so from 79 they lowered the draft age from 20 to 19, and then there was a plan to lower to 18, which is what you have now. Well, a lot of NHL team owners were also owners of junior teams, and they want to lose their gate attraction. So they set a rule that the kid, either if he's not in your NHL roster, he has to go back to junior. You couldn't send him to the American League, which sometimes the player's ready for the American League. Luchenko being a good example. Is he ready for the NHL right now? We don't know, but he's probably too good for Guelph at this point. The AHL might be perfect for him.
He'd get way more out of being with the Phantoms than he would in Guelph.
But you don't have that option. So.
Yeah, interesting. I had shot Danny Briere, the general manager, a text over the weekend, Bill. I was just thinking about this draft and kind of heading into this week, getting my thoughts together. And I see, the 7 picks, so much, equity at the top of this draft. And I just asked him this question. I said, does this period this year heading into this draft with 7 picks in the top 2 rounds feel to you significantly different than it did at this time a year ago, where certainly they didn't have that? And he gave me a great answer, and I can use it on the podcast verbatim. He said, this year, much different because it's more than just the picks. It gives us the chance to look at players available that would fit our plan, but also would get players we all rank inside the top 40, maybe inside the top 30 on our list. What do you think of that quote?
Well, yeah, that goes into what we were just talking about, where the Flyers might be able to use some of these assets to get an NHL roster player. If there's a guy that they like, maybe they move up on him, or maybe he's there with one of those picks. When you have these picks, the scouts have to be prepared to make all of them. So they really try to dot every I, cross every T as to where they slot guys. If you have a guy ranked about 10 slots higher, and you don't think he's going to fall to you, well, then maybe move up and you grab that guy who you might have, maybe even your top 20 or wherever it might be, but significantly higher than where you are in the draft order at that point. That gives them a lot of flexibility to move things around, or to move back a few spots and pick up an asset for a year from now, or whatever the case. So it gives them a lot of things they can do. Whereas a year ago, 2 years ago, particularly, where they didn't have they had to actually trade up to get into the second round when they took Bjarnason. They didn't have a second under that was Tony DeAngelo pick. Remember, that was that moved up one round each year. That was the third and final year. That was the second round pick, and they figured, okay, this is our top rated goalie in this draft. We need to move up and grab it. So it costs you an asset, whereas now you're the team dealing from a position of strength when you want to get something. So in terms of asset management, it's all on the table, all there to be done.
It's interesting because that's just a different feeling going into a draft, especially in a rising cap world where you're in a different position of having hand in negotiations. Yeah. You've got a lot more leverage, and that's everything in a negotiation. Boy, I think it's probably good, Bill, if you're talking about trading up in the first round, maybe, from 22, and you want to trade up 6 or so spots, to speak French Canadian, because the Montreal Canadiens have got 2 picks right in that window. We know Danny Briere speaks French Canadian, with the Montreal Canadiens having the 16th and 17th pick.
Yeah,
I hate when the same team has a back-to-back picks, but maybe it could be beneficial to the Flyers here.
Yeah. Well, when they have the back-to-back picks and they take the entire allotment of time when they already know who they're picking.
Yeah.
And the phone
especially a twin brother.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the Sedin twins, you remember they had Vancouver had the back-to-back picks. That year, I think it was 1999.
Yeah. Brian Burke.
Yeah. But when they're the back, just make the pick.
Yeah, not wasting everybody's time.
Just with they did announce the picks back to back, but most of the time it's they use the entire allotment of time. There's going to be some airtime to fill too for the broadcasters, because they don't have the live cut-ins as to what team is at what other team's table too. So there's going to be a lot of fill-in chatter too.
Yeah, they'll be on camera much more because there's not that picture that to focus down on the floor, if you will, where you see a lot of action happening from time to time. Bill, speaking of guys that drop or guys that risers or fallers, this time last year for this draft, it was James Hagens. Yeah. That's not the case now that the draft is arriving this week. He's had a drop. There was some rumor out there and reporting from Jackie Spiegel that James Hagens visited the Flyers this past week at the Flyers training center. We know that Mishkov did that a couple of years ago playing some bubble hockey. Do you take anything out of that reporting that he visited the Flyers training center, and why is he dropped?
Well, yeah, let's tackle these one at a time. This is a cop-out answer, Jason. It doesn't mean anything unless it does mean something, right?
Yeah.
What I mean by that is it's possible they didn't have a chance to talk to Hagens in Buffalo, or as long as they wanted to. So there could be a scheduling conflict. It could be a smokescreen. They brought him in. He was going somewhere else too, and why don't you stop here on your way to New York, or whatever the case might be. But that being said, too, I do think there could be something to bringing a guy who came in as the consensus number one pick. I know some Flyers people who really liked him a year ago. Mm-hmm. He's a guy who's drawing comparisons to Jack Hughes, in a positive way. And I know the big centers are all the rage again.
Yeah.
And he's in the smaller, actually, significantly smaller side of average. He's not tiny, but he's not big. And Luchenko's on the smaller side of average too, more towards the average side. So if the Flyers do draft him, they have to compensate in other ways, probably by getting bigger on the wings. I know that's a priority. They want to get bigger in general, but I think apart from the size question, I think the expectations, Jason, were so lofty coming into this year that he was going to go in and if you remember Jack Eichel's one collegiate year where he just tore it apart, I think the expectation was anything short of that was going to be a disappointment. Just because he was so highly touted as such a dynamically skilled guy, and he went in his first college year, was a point a game player. Nothing wrong with that. Particularly for a true freshman in college. But the expectations were so high that it felt like a disappointment. And other guys have improved over this year too. Jake O'Brien is another guy, taller, skinny guy. He has to add significant amount of weight, but probably a comparable pure playmaking center. Very good passer, very good setup guy, very good ice vision. You go, well, maybe we'll go with the taller kid who has yet to fill out because maybe his upside ultimately over the long haul, because it's always over the long haul. It's always through. Who you're projecting 3 to 5 years out will be the better overall player. So there's a piece of that too. I think that I don't think anybody's expecting like Michael Misa to have the year that he had. So other guys step forward. He kind of didn't have as dominant a year as was expected. So I think that's why there's a pretty good chance when you combine those two things, the size question and the fact that he didn't dominate to the extent that they were hoping. I think that explains why he might have dropped.
Do you think he's there when they pick at number 6?
I think there's a decent chance. Yeah. Well, in running through what I think will be the top first 5 picks, I still think that there's a pretty good chance that Porter Martone gets in there somewhere in the top 5, which would add another center option for the Flyers. If he doesn't, then that maybe changes the Flyers calculus because you're talking about a guy who's considered a pretty safe bet to be a first-line center, or rather a first-line winger in the NHL. Big and strong, physically mature, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Hardworking kid. And so you go, well, some of these centers are a little bit longer of a term projection. This is a guy who might be able to play sooner.
Maybe more of a known commodity in a way.
And he's a known commodity because there are fewer gaps to fill in. There often are with wingers because we kind of know what they are. The other X factor early in the first round is Brady Martin because that's a guy who was considered probably mid-season to be a late first-round option. Now, all of a sudden, he's a very fashionable guy to go maybe as high as the top 5, if not the top 5, right where the Flyers are. You hear the name. Well, he's a guy whose style absolutely translates to the NHL because he's very physical, very aggressive. He plays he plays small area game. He battles for pucks, et cetera, et cetera.
We've heard Mike Richards' name.
We've heard Mike Richards' name as the top end, and we've heard Scott Lawton as the floor.
Yeah.
Now, Scott Lawton late in the first round of a weak draft, like 2012 was an exceptionally weak draft. That made sense. But would Lawton, a Lawton type in the top 6 of a deeper draft? That's probably not going to do it.
Miss. So, yeah.
If you think, if you think he's Mike Richards, then he certainly is within that realm of a guy you would certainly consider at 6.
Yeah.
Again, not Lawton, or to use some non-Flyers examples, other guys he gets compared to. At the top end, Bo Horvat. Bo Horvat played that same kind of go all out kind of style, and just if you look at what his physical tools are, they're not the best. They're not overwhelming, but he gets the absolute most out of them.
Yeah.
So Martin has a chance of being that kind of a player, but then you have what if he doesn't click at all offensively?
Yeah.
Then like for example, in his draft year, Rafi Torres was picked high in the first round. And if he's Rafi Torres, that's a terrible pick, because you're letting a better player where you might find a Torres segment later on. So
yeah, if McQueen goes in the top 5, it really leaves the Flyers with a lot of center options, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. I would be surprised if McQueen goes in the top 5. But maybe there's a team that looks at, 6'5", again, another big, physically mature kid. He's a year older than, almost a year. He's less than a month and a half older, or less than a month and a half younger than Jet Luchenko is.
Who was last year's draft.
Last year's draft, yeah. Luchenko was on the young end of that draft class, and he's in the older end. McQueen is, and then he missed a whole year with injury. But I think there's also what you call the Caden Lindstrom factor, because Lindstrom went into last year, so that draft. I remember he was picked 4th overall, something like that. I think he was picked 4th. Missed the whole year.
Yeah,
he went into his draft with injury concerns and missed the entire year. So I think teams are really scared of a similar thing happening with Martone, or I keep saying with McQueen rather, even though he has a clean bill of health and whatnot, but you don't know. A spinal fracture is nothing to mess around with. So
yeah, that's the thing when you talk about back. That's one of those things that really scares me, because a lot of other things can become an issue because of the back.
Yeah.
If a guy like Cole Resney were to drop into that 15, 16 range, is that somebody the Flyers would be interested in bumping up to try and get?
Yeah, there are a couple of
another smallish center, but
no. I mean, smallish to average size. There's a couple centers like that in this year's draft, or guys that can play center, but are more likely going to be wingers, or even you can't always tell by how a guy's position is listed. I'll give you a name of a guy who will be a winger. Has played Carter Bear. I don't think he's going to land in the top 10.
Yeah, he's from Everett, right?
Yes, correct.
Yep.
And not the biggest guy, but a lot of skill and tons of character and heart, and that's a guy who will be one of those guys who I think has a really good chance of outperforming some guys that are drafted ahead of him. That would be a name that I look at if the Flyers are moving up, depending on how far they could move up. That might be a guy they might have some interest in.
Verbanken too.
Yeah, that's I think that's another possibility in there as well. And then there's plenty of defensemen too. Guys who are really good tools, and there might be a question mark here or there, whether it's hockey sense or whatever. But I don't think the Flyers are going to go for a defenseman at 6. But once they get through that top 10, if there's still a lot of defensemen on the board, that's again where I think there's a possibility to look at moving up, because there's several guys who are pretty intriguing in there.
You like Atchison out of Barrie?
Yeah, well, Atchison, he and Murtka are the two guys who just have just unbelievable tools. Atchison, it's really just figuring out. He just has to figure out what he wants to be, because he's very physical. He gets under our other team's skin. He's a scorer already at the junior level. I'm not sure he's going to be a scorer at the NHL level, but it's just sometimes figuring out what your identity is and who you'll be as a player. But that's the guy who, will he be a pain to play against? He already is.
Yeah.
So that's those are guys that I think that especially given where the Flyers are in D, where we talked about like several of these NHL guys are on the smaller side. I think some of these guys there might be of interest to them as guys with because defensemen typically take longer anyway. These aren't guys you're figuring are going to be in the NHL. Certainly not their draft year, maybe not even in 2 years, but 3 years out or so. Some of those guys might be really good NHL defensemen.
Bill, the Flyers didn't take a goalie last year. Word on the being out there being kind of publicized by people that Ivan Fedotov's going to start the year in the AHL. I don't know where's Kolosov fit into this equation. I guess we'll eventually find out because Carson Bjarnason's going to also be with the Lehigh Valley Phantoms. There are 2 goalies that have been talked about as maybe first round picks. Flyers with 3 picks in the first round. Would they look at a guy like Ivankovic or Ravensburger in the first round of this draft? They're kind of polar opposite goalies. One guy's not very big, more in the UC Soros, and Ivankovic at 5'11", and the other guy is an albatross at 6'5.5".
I would think Ravensburger would be the one.
Yeah,
if they're taking a goalie in the first round, not that a smaller goalie, if it's a special guy can't have success, but with goalies in particular. I do think they've gone more towards a happy medium because sometimes the
6'2", 6'3".
The Fedotov types. A lot of times there's so many moving parts in there that those guys really take a long time to figure it out.
The NHL got infatuated with that years ago, and they started drafting all these enormous guys. And only a few actually made it to be good. Like Ben Bishop was a good. Obviously, Pekka Rinne was another one, Finnish style goaltender, but. It is hard. There's a lot more mass to move.
Exactly.
East-West League.
A lot of these guys have 5-hole issues.
Yep.
Just because, as you said, there's so many moving parts to get from post to post.
Yeah.
And if they're and if they've adopted the RVH, then they're vulnerable short side.
Yeah.
So.
You just got to look at guys like Bobrovsky. He's not the biggest guy in the world, but it's all about play reading hockey IQ when it comes to goaltending and lateral movement because so much is east to west these days. And I think you got to find a guy who's mentally strong too, because the shot volume's down.
Yes. Oh yeah. I mean that, and with that, the save percentages go down too.
Yep. Exactly.
Because teams aren't throwing a lot of junk at the net. These are higher percentage chances. And two, if you're giving up, if you're facing 18 shots. And you don't have a chance on either. You give up 2 goals, right? So you stop 16 of 18. Statistically, it looks like you had a bad night.
You're an 870.
Yeah, but there's a terrible save percentage for oh boy, he had an off game, but maybe you didn't have a chance on either of those too.
Yeah.
A lot of times the save percentages come up when he's facing a high volume of routine shots. So.
Yeah, I remember when Carter Hart was here and other goalies, Steve Mason was this way as well. When he faces 32 or more shots, he's got a record of, you'd think it would be a bad record. It's not. That means the team's throwing a lot of dreck at you because they can't possibly get along the same percentage of scoring chances when you get that high in shots of the quality scoring. It's about quality, not quantity, people. Speaking of which, Bill, goaltending obviously going to be a big part of it. We'll see how that plays out this offseason. We've got more rumors regarding Maxim Shabanov. This is now the third time. But something very key happened before this rumor hit. Tell people what's going on.
Yeah, correct. He hired a North American agency. So most players in Europe have their home agent for wherever their home league is, and they have a second agent in North America. He did not have representation over here. Now he does. I think that portends making a decision very soon. Certainly his name has been tied to Philadelphia a lot, several times over.
More than any other team.
More than any other team. I think this is a case where there's more than just smoke here. I think while it's not fait accompli or anything like that, it's a done deal. Nothing is signed yet. As we're writing this, and it might not happen until the beginning of July. I do think there's a pretty good shot.
Okay. So he'll be coming over at the age of 24, same age that Artemi Panarin came over and was pretty much a point-per-game player right away. Now, that's a different situation where Chicago was in 25, 15, 16, coming off 3 cups with Kane and Taves and all of that. at the absolute zenith of their career, to coming here in Philadelphia. Both smallish guys on the wing had same performances in their 23-year-old year in the Continental Hockey League. But I don't know if we would expect that out of Shabanov, but we can learn a lot in a year from him.
You can, just because he will fall into a 1-year entry level. It would be the NHL level, obviously. He would come over to go play for the Phantoms at all. That 1 year will tell you, is this guy an NHL player? He's not like Nathan Gerbe small, but he's small. He's smaller than Bobby Brink, to give you an example. Sometimes those guys can find their way into the league. Other times they can't. The Brinkat's small, but he found his niche in the league. So those guys can have a role and can succeed. I'm always about what the mix is. I'd like to see the Flyers mix get a little bit bigger, especially if they're adding a smaller guy. So if they were to add Shabanov, and those rumors are true, I would wonder particularly what it means for Brink, because that you don't want to go too small on the wing.
You have to subtract. You might as well subtract the same.
Yeah, I think and also too, both playing same position.
Right
too.
wing, yeah. You subtract similar stature. Never thought I'd put those three S's together. Bill, one of the things we've talked about quite a bit, I'm going to hit with some random things real quick, was, when players become available. We talked about Jason Robertson. Mason Marchment was available. And some people on Flyers Twitter were kind of freaking out the Flyers didn't get him. He got 1 year left on a deal. To me, that made no sense.
Yeah, and he had a 10-team no trade clause. And and I think he wanted to stay out west anyway. So I think his no trade was heavily concentrated for teams on the East or in Canada too. So might not even been obtainable. If you could, all other things being equal, get a player of that caliber. If the Flyers were a really quality physical role player away from contending, I think.
And he was 28 and had 3 years left at 4.5. I'm there all day.
He's 30. He's 30. Too,
yep.
So,
he's 30 with 1 year left. It just didn't make much sense. And I don't think you would get an asset like that in that deal to then just try and flip it at the deadline. Although the Flyers, in some of these deals and situations, they have the draft capital to make it happen for some of these teams. One of the other things, Bill, when you look at kind of what's going on around the league, Anaheim seems to be grabbing a bunch of guys, some New York Rangers, Kreider. They got earlier in the year, Jacob Trouba. Where are the Rangers going? You're wondering what their path is going to be this summer. Ultimately, you're in this Metropolitan Division. You see where the Penguins are doing. They look like they're clearly committing to rebuild by their coaching hire and how they're going to move forward. What's next for the Devils? Where does Carolina fit in this equation as a team that gets to the conference final, gets clearly outclassed? Danny Briere has got, a lot in front of him to do some significant things this summer. I just wonder how much of it he can do in one summer, with turning things over.
Yeah, you can't check off every box.
Mm-hmm.
One piece that's a must, I think we'll all agree on, is a 1B or backup goaltender. I prefer a 1B.
You just led me right to the drink. Keep going.
There we go.
Well, I'm going to ask you. We talked about RFA sheets for players, and we've talked about whether it's McTavish or going out to Winnipeg to make an offer sheet for Gabe Vilardi or whoever it might be. But Joel Hofer's a guy. You don't think offer sheet and goaltending a whole heck of a lot. But Joel Hofer's a guy that you could probably put a sheet in front of, and they might have a hard time matching it.
Yeah, it's been oddly quiet in St. Louis. Teams are getting a lot of their business done. I noticeably teams that are afraid of certain guys getting an offer sheet, they are really trying to get signed ahead of July 1st.
Yeah.
With the Flyers, Forrester being an example of the guy who they wanted to get ahead of that. So
skip the temptation.
Yeah. So, and maybe it's not an offer sheet situation. Maybe it's a trade situation because they're not on the same page. I don't know, but that's yeah. I mean, this is it's not a great free agent goalie class in terms of guys you consider 1B options. I think there's some decent backups in this draft. I saw Vladar, for example, play a pretty fair amount in Calgary in the second half of the season. While not as good as Wolf, he gave them quality games when they needed them.
Yep.
So there are guys such as that who I think are serviceable backups, to pretty good backups. But given that Sam Ersson has had some injury issues, that he tends to kind of have some really good spells and some not so good spells, and the Flyers have an intention to try to push to be at least in on the bubble and some kind of a mix to compete for a playoff spot. I think you want someone who can at least be a 1B. So that might entail a trade.
Yeah, we'll see how that plays out. It's going to be interesting. Real quick, let me ask you a couple quick hitters. I saw Pierre LeBrun wanted to make, if he was commissioner of the NHL, make some changes, start the season earlier, end it by May 31st, get things underway in the offseason. Is this just Pierre trying to speed up cottage season, or would it benefit? I think the NBA should swing their schedule, Bill, start Christmas and end in the middle of August. That way you don't have finals going against finals, because the numbers were down a bit in the Cup final. Yeah.
And hockey also, hockey also has the weather factor. Florida, I know their ice crew worked overtime to try to make the surface better. But you look at the games in Edmonton, and it's unavoidable, right? The games in Edmonton versus the games in Sunrise, well, the playing surface is like the pace you're able to play at, how many pucks are hopping.
Yeah.
When you're going into June and deep into June, it's going to affect the quality of the product just in terms of the playability. So that's another reason too why I would love to see hockey end by the end of May. I mean, we grew up with that, where the Cup finals would be over in May. You have those long breaks sometimes in the playoffs where sometimes there's a whole week long layoff.
Yeah.
Like to see those be a little bit shorter.
Yeah, I totally agree. Were you surprised what McDavid had to say in his final availability about wanting to win and
just wanting to win and
doing what's best for me and my
and
family?
Ultimately doing what's best for himself. That
he doesn't usually say anything. I was stunned that came out of his mouth.
No, that was definitely an attention grabber, and also, I guess you can interpret how you want by saying unfinished business. That doesn't mean long-term unfinished business. That means I want to win the Cup next year and then decide where I want to go. So that's not a commitment to anything.
Yeah, somebody had tweeted me and said, well, he's just trying to get it, he's starting to negotiate. I'm like, this dude doesn't need to negotiate. He can name his number.
Yeah, exactly.
And he can conceivably get 19 mil when his contract. I don't think he'll end up taking it. But last thing, Bill, there's some word out there that Mitch Marner may sign like a 2-year deal. And I think we're going to see this. I think we're going to see players take shorter term deals here, like UFAs, to get that next payday as well, because they don't know what the financial landscape is going to look like in 3 to 4 years. I think they know that it's not going to be worse for the player, but it could be significantly better. So why tie yourself out of a chance to get even a bigger payday in 3 or 4 years than the conventional 8-year deal or 7-year deal if you're going outside the organization you're with?
Yeah, the only argument for it is you have a family, you want to be in one place. Know your kids are going to be in school and those kind of things, because sometimes lifestyle things, family considerations come into play. But for financial reasons, these guys have especially guys who are still in their prime years, you bet on yourself, and you're probably going to have a significantly bigger payday just because of liquidity in the system.
Yeah. So it's going to be fascinating to see. Somebody also had messaged me and said that, I think this person was from Edmonton, Connor McDavid's not leaving. His wife also has a business here as well. I'm like, do you realize the amount of dough you're going to be making? She doesn't need the side business. She may want to do it. I respect it, but Please give me a break. And Edmonton will be crushed. And I think Edmonton's got something to learn when Marner walks away this summer for nothing. Yeah. 100-point player walks away, and they have nothing to show for it.
Yeah, of course, if they won the cup or got back to the finals at least for the first time since '67, then maybe go, you know what, it was a high price to pay, but it was worth it. But
yeah,
well, when you don't get there and the guy walks, that's when it hurts.
It is draft week. Hang with us all week. Read Bill's work at PhiladelphiaFlyers.com, NHL.com, and HockeyHotStove.com. And we'll play it out as it goes this week. It's going to be a fascinating week in Flyerland and around the NHL. Thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you Wednesday on a brand new Flyers Daily.